A friend gave me this antique desk. They used it for years homeschooling their kids, but they're done with that now. And as you can tell, it needs some work. So I am excited to see what we can do with this. I think it has great potential. My name is Sarah, and I like to take things that are ugly and beat up or pulled out of the trash and make them beautiful again. Welcome to my channel. I really enjoy experiencing history, and working on a piece that is over 100 years old really excites me because I just think about all the people that have used this, what kind of stories this piece of furniture tells. Just your imagination can go wild, but I'm excited to refinish this piece because it has so much potential. It's wood. You can see here that it does have veneer. It looks like, at least, a veneer top on both sides of this desk top, but it's pretty solid wood. These hinges, I've never seen hinges like this before. The ones that it currently is using is not original. It had these inset hinges, so I will go online and see if I can order the exact same thing so I can get it back to its original state. Now this corner there, I'm not going to repair it. I'm not good at that. These nicks taken out from the original hinges, I'm also not going to mess with that. I'll leave that as is. The regular dings and nicks I can get out with sanding. It's interesting, the back side underneath wasn't scratched up near as bad as the front side underneath, which makes sense because the chair would have been going in and out. Now, as I'm looking this piece over, if you notice that gap between the top board and the base of the desk, the lid has been pulling that up, and I definitely need to address that because I don't want to do all the work to refinish this and then the top get totally pulled off when you open the desktop. The way that they filled the holes of the nails that were in here previously, some of them are still filled, some are not, but I think it's cool. I don't know, it just adds character and interest. So I'm not going to fill any of these holes that are not filled. I'm just going to leave them as is. I do want to let it tell a little bit of its story, but take away a lot of the pretty rough blemishes. I will start by taking off these hinges that are not original to the piece. I meant to ask why these were put on and not the original hinges. I'm going to guess they broke or something and it was just easier to replace this. I did go online and look for these pocket hole hinges, and while I couldn't find anything on basic sites like Amazon, I did find some on eBay. So I was able to order those from China, which will just make this project take a little longer as it's going to take a few weeks to get here. But I think it's worth it to try to bring it back to its original, just its original intent. And just like any other piece, I'm going to clean this up. I have Simple Green as my degreaser to give it a good wipe down. You can see it was a little dirty. There was a little gooey spot, and so I'm just using some Goo Gone and this toothbrush to let it soak a little bit and then scrub it off. And the scrubbing didn't work well enough, so I went and got a little scraper, but that didn't work either. So I very carefully, because these are sharp, used a wood chisel and was able to carefully scrape off the goo without scratching too much. To fix the top coming off, probably to do it well would be to completely take it off and nail it back down again and glue it a little bit. But those holes that I showed you that were already filled in, I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to have to refill them. I have not had great experience with filling holes, so I'm just coming in with a piece of paper and glue and trying to squeeze some glue down into that crack, and then that rubber mallet you see in the corner, I'm going to let the nails be my clamp and use the rubber mallet to hammer it back down into place and hope that holds good enough. With most of my pieces that I need to sand off a rough finish, I'm going to start with 120 grit sandpaper. This is large enough to really take out a lot of the dings and nicks and stains. This is a veneer, so I do need to be careful I do not take out too much. But this is usually safe. I don't like going to those smaller numbers, the bigger grits. I feel like that takes out way too much and is a lot of work to work your way back up to smooth wood. So as I work on this one, I'm going to purposely sand only half of it so that you can see the stark difference after using 120 grit sandpaper of how much it can take off. This is the top of the desk. It was the most beat up part of the whole piece. And while it doesn't take out everything, it takes out a lot. And this is a good place to start, because as you move to the 150 grit sandpaper and then the 220 grit sandpaper, which is where I finish, each of those steps takes out a little bit more of the dings and nicks and stains. The underside of this desktop, you can tell, is way less worn and has way more of the stain. So it did take a little bit more work to get that off. The more worn a finish is, the easier it usually is to come off. So this was definitely harder. So here I moved to 100 grit sandpaper because I needed a little more oomph to pull off this finish. And that took that off much easier than the 120 grit sandpaper. So once I got the desktop done, I'm sticking back with the 120 grit because I don't need the 100, and sanding the entire piece. I'm first going to hit everything that I can with the Orbital sander. And the first time sanding is much more tedious because I'm taking off the varnish, I'm taking out the stain, so it's more time consuming. I'm going through every area that I can to get as much off as I can. I don't need to get everything off. Like I said, as I go up to 180 and 220, more dings and nicks will work its way out. Once I go through and sand all these areas that I can with the Orbital sander, here's what it looked like. Without the detail, the corners still look very dark. So now it's time to go in with my hand and hand sand all these funky areas. Now, a padded sander like a Surf Prep, I see people using all the time, and it would probably be worth the money to save my hands from doing all this. But I have not invested in one of those yet. So here I am. I sand by hand. And you know, if it's a nice day out, it's not bad. You can listen to podcasts or just, ponder life and enjoy the quiet. But all the crevices and corners, I hand sanded. I came back another day and was ready to sand everything with the next level of sandpaper, the 180 grit. And once I got everything wiped and ready, I go to turn it on and my sander didn't turn on. And I had noticed it had been acting funky, so I had an idea something was up, but this was sad. It died. I tried plugging it in different places in case it was one of my outlets, but that didn't work. So the next day, I went and picked up a brand new sander, and this was funny. I go to turn it on, it didn't turn on because I forgot to plug it in. And so then I plugged it in and then come back, and it still didn't turn on because the extension cord I plugged it into wasn't plugged in. Once I got all that figured out and working, we were good to go to get going on this project. It can be really disheartening when you want to get a piece done, want to work on it, and things aren't working. So you just have to laugh, take a deep breath, and take these things as they come. So I both hand sanded and did the Orbital sander on this desktop with the 180 grit sandpaper. I did not sand with the Orbital sander yet the top side of this desktop, just the bottom side. And then I went to the rest of the piece and sanded everything. Everything had to get sanded 3 times. And when things have these intricate corners, it can feel like a lot, but what I have to do is I'll take it in a day, I'll do what I can in a day, and if I'm getting bored or stiff, I'll stop, and then I go back to it another day, or for an hour, and then I stop. I just take it in small amounts so I don't let it overwhelm me. It's like eating an elephant, right? Because we all have times in our lives where we have to eat elephants, right? If you don't know what I mean, that's a saying where you how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. That's how you tackle large projects. Anyway, so I sanded everything I could with the Orbital sander, then came in again with the hand sander, and I'm talking all the nooks and crannies. I mean, I was up close and personal with this piece while sanding, and that's really important because then at those moments you can see areas that you might need to patch or that are loose and need taken care of. So it's not bad, just takes time and can make your back really stiff. I got everything done with the 180, and now I'm going in with the 220. And again, I'm not going to show it all to you. You get the idea. So back to the desktop. the top of the desktop, there are some scratches that I'm pretty sure if I put stain on this, it would magnify the darkness of the scratch and stand out. So one thing you can do to address scratches that are deep, especially in something that's a veneer like this, where you cannot just sand all day and get it out, is to take a wet towel and a hot iron and press it on the area, and that causes the wood to swell and kind of helps pull the wood up out of the crack. And then I sanded a little bit, didn't want to go too deep, so I came back in with the iron and just held it. I didn't hold it on too long. Probably the longest was about 20 seconds. I didn't want to burn the wood. That's why you have the wet towel. Well, and you need the water to get it to swell. So I just rotated back and forth many times until I felt like it was cleaned up enough. And there were multiple times I was like, I think that's probably as good as I can get it. And I thought, no, I'm going to do it one more time. I think we can get it better. And I'm glad I kept going because eventually I got them pretty much completely gone. So be patient with this process if you try to do this to get some scratches out. Now, like I had mentioned earlier, there were hinges used that are not original to the piece. I did get the hinges that were needed, so I debated whether to patch the holes. I was not going to. If you saw my flip with the antique library desk that I completely took apart called Flip or Flop, I patched all the holes in that and I regretted it because this wood filler does not, well, at least on that piece, it stood out as white dots all over the piece and I totally regretted it. But I decided this piece was coming along so well, the wood looked so good, I got all these scratches and stuff out that I thought leaving these holes wouldn't look right. So I patched them. After it dried and I sanded everything nice and smooth, I was just checking it over and I don't know. I was debating whether that was the right choice to make, to patch it. You can see the holes that were patched originally. I think they used a tinted filler, and I don't have any tinted fillers, and I've not had good success with these staining. If you saw my little vintage end table flip that I did recently, those spots did not stain well at all. So I really am hoping at this point that I did not ruin my piece by adding these and that they won't stand out like a sore thumb. However, I did like the stain that I used on that vintage table. And while I'm looking at this and I see a little bit of blotchiness in the wood on the desk here, I'm hopeful that I can get a nice clean stain with the new stain that I got, but I'm going to pre-stain it this time is what I'm thinking at this point so that I can, ensure the best stain that I can. But all in all, I'm really excited with how good this looks all sanded down. I mean, there's some imperfections. It's just how it is with an antique piece. I mean, this piece has got to be over 100 years old. So for how much wear or life it's been through, it looks really good. So when it came time to put the new hinges in that I ordered, they actually were not the correct size, but they were close enough that all I needed to do was chisel the hole out a little bit more. So I have these wood chisels that I got at Harbor Freight. They cost, not very much at all. And I just slowly worked at this hole, chiseling out. I had to chisel out both sides. And then the hinges were a little deeper than the hole I already had, so I had to scrape out the bottom as well to get the hole a little deeper because I wanted the hinges to rest flush because the desktop, it needs to rest flush against the base. And if the hinges would stick out, then it would cause it to push away from each other and cause a gap up there. So while I've never used hinges like this, I've never installed hinges like this, I'm just doing what made sense to me and hoping that it is right when I go put everything together. But it took a lot of patience and diligence to just slowly scrape. I was willing to go slow in order to make sure that I didn't go beyond what was needed. I didn't want it to be a loose hole. And each pocket, there's 4 holes that I needed to address. each hole I did, I got better and faster at the next, because at first I thought, oh boy, this is going to take a long time. So I put the hinges in place and try the lid on with it to make sure that my idea was right, that they're flush, they look good, and I liked what I saw. So I was really excited. Because I had to widen the space, that made the holes that the screws grow into no longer align with what was already in there. So I needed to fill those holes. And you don't want to fill those with just wood filler. You need something strong. So I have skewers, like just kebab skewers, wooden ones, not metal ones, obviously, that I cut to fit into the hole, and I'll glue those in, and that'll fill it nice and strong that I can drill a new pilot hole for the screws. Now, I'm just sticking the skewer down into the hole as best I can and marking it with my finger, and then cutting it with my little shears here, and then gluing, covering that stick with a lot of glue and filling the hole. And I did this with all of them. That was 2, 4, 6, 8 holes, and it did not take much time at all. At this point, it's exciting because we're kind of through all the hard stuff, and now we just need to clean it up, stain it, and seal it, and obviously put the top back on, and this is done. So after wiping everything down really good, I want to get all the dust off and let it dry. I'm trying a new stain that I have never used before. It looked really good on the sample at the store, so I chose this one. I've never used a Varathane stain. I've always stuck with Minwax just because I have. This one also has the pre-stain in it, so I wasn't going to pre-stain, which I didn't know if that would or would not be a bad idea, but I decided to trust the can, and I tested it on the middle part here, and I liked it. I was like, okay, this is good. I like the color. We'll go with it. I like this darker brown. Regular early American seems to be a less tinted stain maybe. This is almost like a brown tinted stain versus a clearer stain. I don't know. If you've worked with stains, maybe you know what I'm talking about. But I liked this brown. So I went with it and did the entire bottom, all the sides, and flipped it up and did the inside, everything. And I let that dry for a while, and I was a little bummed at how splotchy the wood is, but it's the wood. I don't know, maybe I could have sanded it more, but originally it looked a little splotchy anyway, so I've decided I can't change it. This is the wood, so we're going to go with it. I used a clear satin poly top coat, and I have decided that I like using these foam brushes over paint brushes. The paint brushes, for me, have left stroke marks and not a smooth finish, and so I prefer these foam brushes, and I just go over it very gently, try to go over it as few times as possible, but at the same time, not leave any thick areas, especially in corners or edges, that could, it just dries kind of opaque instead of clear. It just doesn't look good. So very meticulously go over the whole piece. I let that dry. I have to pay attention to my weather. When it's rainy out, I have to let things dry a lot longer than the can would say. So once I'm sure it's dry, which could be overnight, could be a few hours, depending on my weather, I'm coming in with a 220 grit sandpaper to sand off any thick areas. And I'm not sanding hard, I'm sanding very lightly, but any areas that bubbled or were a little thick or like dripped on the edge or anything like that, I want to get a smooth finish. I don't want to sand off the finish, but just sand down any bumps and bubbles. And then I'll wipe everything down with just a dry towel so that I can go in and do my second and third coat. Now, after all those coats dried, there were 2 areas of concern. It was so disappointing. I've worked so hard on this, and some parts didn't set right. So that means to me something underneath the wood isn't clean, isn't right, something's not right. I debated whether I could just leave it, but I decided no, it doesn't look right. It's not a solid finish. So I took my 220 grit sandpaper and sanded it down. Again, this is I was done. Like, all the top coats were done. And it's so disheartening when you're like, I'm done, let's put it together and show it off. And it's like, nope, got to start over in some areas. So I thought I could sand just that little area and stain it and put a top coat over it. But after that stain dried, I decided it's not going to look right. I can't do that. I'm going to have to sand off the finish, everything on this little edge, not the whole piece, just the little edge. And then the desktop, when it dried, it didn't set right. So there was some oil or something underneath. There's ring marks from where I had it sitting on the cans before I stained, or before I sealed the top, when I sealed the bottom of the top desktop first. So I had to take it all outside and sand off everything that I had just done. I sanded the finish off and I sanded the stain off of both the desktop and that lip that the desktop attaches to. So once I got that sanded down, I cleaned it with some mineral spirits. My dad helped me out and looked up online what could cause this splotchiness or this uneven finish, and often it's not cleaning it properly when it's the raw wood. I cleaned it up with mineral spirits, which just means I wiped it on my raw wood surfaces and then let it dry. So I let it sit for a day or more. And then this time I came in with the pre-stain, even though I did not do that originally, because I wanted to ensure a better even stain, both on that edge piece and on the desktop. And then within 2 hours, I come back and did the stain again and let that dry. And this time it looked so much nicer. And I was like, okay, we can work with this. And again, I put on a top coat of poly, let that dry, and then come back and sand off the bubbles. But I was very meticulous this time because I did not want to have to do this again. Now, I come back when everything's dry and I'm ready to put this together, and I realized that some of the paint cans left paint on the bottom side of the desktop. And I'm just going to gently sand it with the 220 grit sandpaper to get those little marks off and just do one more layer of top coat. And I very meticulously put that on. However, now that I let it sit and dry, I realized the other side has only sat for a day and it's not very well set. And I'm really nervous by tomorrow when I flip this over that I just ruined the desktop that I just did. So I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, please, please, please do not let me have just made the worst decision ever by refinishing this bottom side when the top side wasn't fully set. Because, doing both sides of a flat surface is not my favorite. This takes a lot of dry time. A lot. Anyway, gonna let this dry and sit overnight, and tomorrow we will see how it did. So the good news was I came back the next day, everything dried fine, and the desktop that was sitting upside down did not get any scratches or anything stuck into it by sitting upside down before it had fully set and dried. It was fine. Everything was fine. And now I need to attach the hinges so we can call this piece done and show you the final reveal. Now, I was extra anal about putting these hinges in because I did not want to mess anything up. I didn't want to have to redo anything. Emotionally, I'm just like, I need this project to be finished. And, a lot of flips look perfect and just, this was so happy and so easy, but a number of flips take some emotional energy out of me. So I just like to be real and tell you how it is. So I, measured 10 bajillion times, cut once idea. I made sure I had the hinges exactly where I wanted them, drew a dot for where the screws needed to go, and I marked on the drill bit how far in I should go, which was just a little shorter than the length of the screws. And then I chose to hand screw in each screw with a screwdriver instead of using a power screw tool because often when I use a power tool, my handles slip, and I did not want to scratch this wood at all. So I'm like, I'm carefully going to screw each screw in by hand. And I did, and it was fine. It wasn't a big deal. I just emotionally, I could not handle if I had scratched it. So then when it was time to attach the top to the desk part, I figured put the hinges on the desktop first and then attach it to the desk. And I think I did it the hard way. I don't know why I didn't think about this. So I marked where the screws needed to go. And as I was looking at it, I looked at how crooked it was, and I just had to take a minute. And I was like, ugh, is this even going to look right? I put so much thought into this, guys. I did not want to mess this up. And I wanted it to be nice and level. And I've never put these in, so I don't have experience to go off of. And you can see here, the screw holes were pretty level, not exactly the same as where they were, but you can see why I had to fill these holes with these pegs, because it was just slightly off, but I needed those holes filled to make the hole tight for the new screws. So anyway, I very awkwardly, with one hand and the help of a dolly behind the desk, held this up so that I could start to screw the hinges in. And then at some point, I realized, I'm looking at this and I'm like, wait a minute, why don't I use gravity to help me with this? Gravity totally, I could have laid this on its back and not had this awkward holding. So I had to get the screws screwed in so far so that the lid could shut, and then I moved it to the ground so I could let the gravity finish the work of holding everything so I could just screw it in. I'm just like, ugh. Anyway, I got it done. It was on. Little victory dance, guys. It worked. It's done. It's done. I love this part when a piece is finished. And look, it matched up nicely. It maybe not perfect, it's a little raised, but it matched up so good. And the hinges work. It's so exciting. Okay, so let's look back at it before. Now, I did have a thought that I should have probably used oxalic acid on the desktop because of all this staining. It might have gotten rid of some of that staining, and I don't know why it never occurred to me. I'm kind of kicking myself, but oh well, it's done. It's a little splotchy, but it's not the worst. So okay, here's what we started with. A little rough, definitely a lot of wear, and let's enjoy what this has turned into. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you have enjoyed this, learned something along the way, and maybe you have suggestions of things you would have done differently. I would totally take those in the comments. I'm always wanting to learn how to do my craft better. I love doing these projects. This is fun for me. But thanks for watching. Thanks for making it this far in the video, and I hope to see you in another video.